Chapter 211, The formation activates. Gabriel flicked the longsword in his hand and sent silver fighting aura splitting through the air, accompanied by a vicious icy killing intent that pierced one down to the bones. As Emily gasped in shock, Trunks and Gilbert had already charged to intercept Gabriel. Trunks had an inscrutable expression as he brandished his sword on the back of his manticore, forming a round milky white fighting aura circle in front of him. Gilbert held a dark long spear in his hand. He had no martial arts foundation and so flung his spear forward with the inborn strength of a dark dragon tribe descendant. There was a string of metallic clangs and explosions. Trunks grunted and evaded swiftly with the manticore. Gilbert's spear was broken into two as his chest was marked by the fighting aura, revealing a large patch of dark skin. Great Sword Master Gabriel refocused his attention, his impassive face like it was carved out of stone. He was in no hurry to attack but turned his gaze to where Han Shao and the little skeleton were. The howl of the bone dagger suddenly grew in intensity and a gleaming bone dagger shot out from the direction Gabriel was looking in. The little skeleton behind the curtain had focused his purple eye on Gabriel and was waving the 5 finger bones of his left hand. Trunks was heavily panting and Gilbert had been shocked into a cold sweat as they both reacted to Gabriel's strength. A simple swing had forced Trunks to dodge and evade like he'd faced an avalanche of attacks. The immensely strong Gilbert had simply thrown out a spear because he hadn't understood any martial techniques, only to have it hacked into two by the silver aura. If he hadn't shifted in time, his chest would have been cut open by the fighting aura as well. Just as the two were fretting over how to handle Gabriel's support from the little skeleton arrived. Gabriel couldn't help but treat this gleaming dagger carefully. The ability to deploy a magical treasure was an incantation unique to magical cultivators. Gabriel had obviously been shocked by this incredible attack, which was why he'd given up the chance to further beat down on Trunks and Gilbert and had turned his attention to fully sensing how the little skeleton was manipulating the bone dagger. The silver fighting aura was radiant and stunning, and it seemed like glorious clusters of fireworks beneath the starry sky, erecting an impregnable defense around Gabriel. The little bone dagger circled around him, emitting ear-piercing howls as it tried to give Gabriel a lethal blow. Small collision sounds continued to sound around Gabriel along with sparks, and the little bone dagger's path became more and more unpredictable. "What are you standing you there? Attack!" Andy suddenly roared from above. The mercenaries had been staring flabbergasted at the little bone danger's unbelievable attacks. They were finally awakened to their senses by this yell and either raised their bows to find their targets or wheeled their swords circling past Gabriel to charge at Trunks and the others. Andy and the other Thunder Mage on top of the roof also got to work when they saw the swordsmen and knights start charging below. They too used magic to attack Emily and the others. In the span of a moment, 3 fiercely burning fireballs as big as records started descending down to where Emily and the others were rolling violently with the heat of their flames. Several bolts of lightning also ripped through the sky and crushed down, sparks flying everywhere. "Oh dear!" Emily exclaimed and released a dark magic spell she'd prepared in advance. An enormous oily green net appeared over people's heads as she chanted. When the net formed, it delayed the 3 enormous fireballs, but the thunder attack went through the holes in the net and still came crashing down. Emily and the others kept continuously ducking and weaving, evading the lightning strikes. The ground within the courtyard kept crackling and popping as 2 of the Shura pillars were also hit by lightning, piercing the darkness with light. A clang sounded from Gabriel's direction. He'd gotten a grasp on the bone dagger's pattern of attack and used his sword to connect solidly with the bone dagger, sending it clattering to the ground. "The friend within the house, your marvelous techniques are quite amazing, but your preferred style of hiding yourself and ambushing others is a bit shameful. Since you have such a marvelous technique, you should walk out forthrightly from the house and meet with me in battle." Great Sword Master Gabriel naturally thought it was the reclusive Han Shao manipulating the bone dagger. Although he too had seen the little skeleton and his somewhat bizarre hand motions, he wasn't willing to believe that such a wondrous method of attack originated from a lowly dark creature. However, the little skeleton's next moves completely wrecked his understanding of the world. The little skeleton's purple eye flared with light as he jumped out of the window with a twist of his body, landing to face Gabriel's provocation. He curled the 5 fingers of his right hand and the bone dagger lying on the ground suddenly flew upwards, landing in his hand like lightning. Gabriel couldn't react for a moment as he stared incredulously at the little skeleton, his mind short-circuiting for a bit. An even more stunning thing happened as this moment, as the little skeleton bent over slightly, making the 7 bone spurs on his back suddenly fly out and shoot towards Gabriel like 7 bolts of lightning. "Oh my gosh!" A cry of astonishment that only Gabriel could hear flew out of his mouth. He was once again forced to become passive, defending himself by concentrating his silver fighting aura onto his longsword and expending all his focus on parrying the 7 bone spurs' aerial attacks. The little skeleton raised the bone dagger and crashed into the attacking mercenaries in a mass of flailing limbs. He revealed his cruel side as he bent and flexed his leg bones, landing into the group of mercenaries like a flash of lightning. He shot out his empty left hand and connected with a soft splurting sound, dripping out 5 bloody gorges in the chest of a journeyman swordsman and creating a bloody fountain. His right hand brandished the bone dagger and flourished it wildly, sending a nearby mercenary's head flying off his neck at high velocity. Bloody sprayed everywhere from the severed neck, dyeing the little skeleton's clean skeleton in an eerie red. 2 crossbow bolts whistled and dinged into the little skeleton's back and chest with metallic sounds. The 2 bolts clattered to the ground as 2 white traces appeared on his bones. The 2 bolts hadn't harmed the little skeleton, but he had indeed been affected, as his originally swiftly moving body couldn't help but waver a bit from the crossbow bolt attacks. Some of the mercenaries nearby took advantage of this opportunity to send their spears and swords at the little skeleton. Multiple dings rang out from his skeleton as these strings of attacks seemed to daze the little skeleton, and his control over the 7 bone spurs also suddenly ceased. The bone spurs had been flying around Gabriel and attacking him, whirled uncontrollably and crashed into a nearby sure pillar. It was as if a powerful inhibition had been triggered. Winds gusted through the courtyard and a thick sense of death suddenly spread to all 4 corners. The night sky was covered by this deathly aura, and not even the slightest hint of starlight made it through this shroud. Only a beam of evil red light rose to the sky from the center. The stark-white pillars had been deathly quiet until now, when horrifying wails and screams suddenly rang out. The cries of ghosts and howls of wolves drilled into one's brain, making the scalp tingle with numbness. It was like a vicious ghost was crouched next to one's ear, sticking a tongue out of its blood-red maw to lick at one's earlobe. The ghostly drawings on the pillars abruptly came back to life as they all capered and caterwauled. The pillars seemed to turn into demons with hundreds, no thousands, tentacles that continuously waved around, attacking all life around them. "Hurry and take cover!" Emily shouted when she saw that the formation had been triggered. The others had actually already started moving before Emily's shout. They hastened to stand in the safe spots that Han Shao had told them about before. Footsteps once again sounded outside as the couple dozen Cairo mercenaries originally surrounding the shop on the outskirts couldn't help but charge into the courtyard when they saw that Han Shao's group hadn't taken care of the attackers after so long. On a large tree 3 shops away, the dark Grand Magus Edwin and female alchemist Belinda of the Church of Calamity stood atop a large tree. They looked at the blood-red light in the distance and the center of the location, where 100 ghosts were wailing and screaming while strange winds were blowing. "Can it be that the legendary evil god's curse has truly taken effect?" Belinda's eyes were filled with shock as she spoke to Edwin. "I don't know, the presence within is quite odd. Even I don't know what's going on." "Let's not draw near for now and see what's going on first." Edwin shook his head with some confusion. Chapter 212, Slaughter. "What's going on? What's going on here? I can't see anything. Someone's attacking me. What's going on in this courtyard?" Exclamation mark. "Everyone be careful, this is the most sinister place in the Valley of Sunshine. It must be the evil god's curse taking place. Retreat everyone, leave the courtyard. No one can leave this place alive when the evil god's curse takes effect." Panicked screams rang out from the mouths of the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries who'd entered the yard. These people had all heard of the legend of the store, and when they saw abnormalities happen they all tried to immediately leave in great haste. However, when the formation had been activated, the first formation of illusions had already taken effect. Apart from Emily and the others standing in safe zones, all the other mercenaries who'd brashly intruded could see nothing of their surroundings as the thick sense of death permeated the air. Several foggy shadows suddenly shot out of the well in the center of the courtyard. When the Kelpies sensed the presence of living humans nearby, they began to attack the mercenaries without hesitation. In an instant the mercenaries suddenly felt their bodies grow cold cold and it seemed like something liquid had entered their bodies. Their minds were hazy and befuddled as a voice seemed to take control of them, forcing them to wander involuntarily to the well and jump in. 3 splashes echoed as the mercenaries plummeted into the well amidst disorientation. The ice-cold well water immediately restored their minds' clarity, but their efforts to crawl out of the well at any cost were stymied. Their bodies were no longer under their control as they began to sink slowly into the depths. 3 despairing screams suddenly rang out from the well. As their voices filled with terror and despair, the scalps of all the other mercenaries in the courtyard grew ever more numb. It was then that they finally realized there were many unknown dangers in this courtyard. This flash of enlightenment caused them give up any further thoughts of aggression as they frantically tried to navigate the courtyard according to their memories, attempting to leave this evil and dangerous place with the fastest speed possible. However, the modestly sized courtyard seemed to stretch on for an eternity in every direction. They retreated according to their memories, and their speed should have taken them out of this area a long time ago, but they never seemed to be able to find it, and cries of agony rang out in succession next to their ears. The illusion suddenly changed as another them suddenly appeared in front of them. These apparitions were wielding sharp weapons and leering at them, attacking the real one mercilessly. The fear brought about from this phenomenon destroyed their willpower in an instant, thoroughly diffusing their fighting spirit. Screams of fear and helpless sobbing echoed as all the mercenaries sank into a state of frenzied violence, randomly flailing their weapons about. Even the most stout-hearted mercenary found it hard to accept a double attacking them ruthlessly, and they were all equally scared, lashing out at everything and anything. And like this, all the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries who had entered the courtyard went insane in a matter of moments. They fought against each other enthusiastically as cries of mental breakdowns, anguish, pain, and the clang of weapons rang out from all corners of the courtyard. Emily and the others in the safe zones had their lines of vision affected by where they were, so they couldn't see what was going on in the courtyard. However, the various sounds and shouts from those trapped within allowed them to understand that the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries were caught in a situation that they would find hard to forget for the rest of their lives. Whenever a whale cut off suddenly, it meant that another life had been lost. They would then see another wisp of gray sucked into the sure pillars next to them. As each soul vanished, the souls inhabiting the sure pillars would provide more evil power to the pillars, making the wind howl even more fiercely within the courtyard and spreading the presence of death even more quickly. Andy and the Thunder Mage could do nothing but watch the changes in the courtyard. The thick presence of death obscured the sky, and apart from a blood-red beam rising into the sky from the center, there was nothing else that entered their eyes. Like Emily and the others, the cries of helplessness and despair rang continuously in their ears. Contrary to the feelings of Emily and the others, Andy and the other mage felt their scalp grow numb as their hearts palpitated in fright. They didn't dare randomly cast fire and thunder spells because they couldn't see the situation clearly. They could only stand anxiously on top of the roof and scratch their heads, attempting to find a more appropriate way to help. Although everyone's vision had been affected, the little skeleton was standing in the center of the courtyard with his purple eye sparkling fiercely like an elegant gentleman. He walked leisurely as if taking a stroll through the ballroom, and walked with light steps with the bone dagger in his hand. He ambled at ease through the courtyard of madness, walking at the side of the mercenaries, randomly waving their blades. He made a grasping motion with his left hand bones and created bloody gauges in the mercenaries, or just directly twisted their necks. The bone dagger sparkled with cold light as it drew beautiful arcs, cutting off agonized wails and reaping yet another life. When the attacking mercenaries had all fallen one by one, the great sword master Gabriel had become the little skeleton's final target. Gabriel was much more difficult to handle than he'd imagined. Silver fighting aura filled the area around him as his brows jumped up and down on his face. It was obvious that he too was feeling the effects of the formation, but he was in no hurry to attack his surroundings and had focused on defending his area instead. It was because of these conservative actions that only the weakest attacks had drawn near him. Those mercenaries that were closest to him were all blocked by the fighting aura, but these mercenaries were all busy killing each other or had been easily slaughtered by the little skeleton. Apart from the enormous strain of his fighting aura, Gabriel hadn't suffered at all from the formation. situation. The little skeleton drew near to Gabriel and wanted to keep using the same easy method to reap his life, but it wasn't that easy. Since Gabriel was holding on to the mindset of being willing to forego achievements as long as he could protect himself adequately, he'd used his silver fighting aura to form curtains around him, thoroughly defending himself. The little skeleton couldn't penetrate the great swordmaster's method either. When he arrived, the little skeleton rubbed his head in frustration as he stood by Gabriel's side, his purple eye rolling around busily as he tried to figure out the best way to handle the situation. Who dares ignore the presence of the Cairo mercenary band and attempts to commit murder in the Valley of Sunshine? Lorden's explosive roar crashed in from the distance like a great wave from the sea. Heavy hoofbeats sounded from afar with his shout, "This is bad, that lore monster is coming. We need to retreat." The Thunder Mage on the rooftop suddenly said lowly, "But Gabriel is still down there," and he also had a panic look on his face as he looked anxiously downwards. "No time for all of that. If we don't leave now we won't be able to win. Lore monster makes his way here. But if you want to die that badly I won't make you leave either," the Thunder Mage said coldly without a glance at Andy. He used the levitation spell to lift himself up and flew off into the distance. Andy looked blank for a bit and finally shook his head with resignation. He stomped his foot and also used a levitation spell to float upwards, vanishing into the night behind the Thunder Mage. When Andy and the Thunder Mage had left, Edwin and Belinda also left their post from a great tree not too far away and followed them soundlessly. At this moment the 6 sure pillars quickly sucked in the presence of death and ill winds within the courtyard. In a couple of moments starlight once again shone down onto the courtyard. As the formation's effects withdrew, it left behind only a ground littered with bodies and Gabriel still waving his sword around. "Kill him!" Gilbert yelled and grabbed a battle axe from the body nearby, charging towards Gabriel. Phoebe and Trunks also knew that this opportunity was uncommon as they too brandished their weapons, charging towards Gabriel with the fastest speed possible. They combined their efforts with the little skeleton to issue a strong attack towards Gabriel. Gabriel reacted very swiftly as soon as the formation's effects wore off. He took a quick look around and understood that his operations this time had failed completely. He moved without hesitation and leapt for the rooftop. Gilbert and the others' attacks arrived at this time only to be met with a rock from the roof as Gabriel's longsword flicked with a silver flash of fighting aura, batting it into the path of the attacks coming at him from behind. An explosion sounded as the flying battle axe was halted by the large rock. The bone dagger howled as it broke apart the rock directly threatening Gabriel. Gabriel swept his longsword in an arc and finally sent the little bone dagger flying to the side. However, Trunks and Phoebe's fighting auras also arrived in front of Gabriel at this time. A ghastly scream spilled from his lips as his swiftly flying body suddenly paused with a crisscrossing pattern of blades appearing on his back. It was obvious that he'd suffered great injury. As he fled in a panic, he spat out great mouthfuls of fresh blood. Emily used the levitation spell to fly upwards and was about to chant a dark magic to give him the final blow when a fierce arrow flew out of nowhere like cold lightning. It brought with its speed a frosty chill, something that she felt before it even drew near her. Emily choked off her incantation halfway through and suddenly dropped out of the sky. However, that cold arrow still doggedly clung to her path and shot towards her neck like a lethal flash of lightning embodied with a fearful chill and ruthlessness. There wasn't even enough time to chant a spell at this moment. Gilbert and the others were all within the courtyard and had just sent forth an enormously vicious blow. Whether in terms of personal speed or fighting aura, there was nothing that anyone could do for Emily at this time. The person who had sent out this arrow had an exquisite grasp of timing, understanding the right moment to strike. They'd melded ice magic into this arrow, and the swiftness and cruelty of this shot was one that greatly frightened onlookers. Despair filling her face, Emily's hopes vanished at this moment. There was only one thought in her mind: was she going to die like this? However, nothing is ever absolute in life. In that moment of certain death, a red light ripped through the dark sky and appeared next to Emily, crashing into that lethal arrow with irrefutable accuracy. The missile broke apart on contact and the frosty air scattered as it was unable to concentrate into one place. Emily had snatched her life back from the jaws of death, and the glee of living after a disaster filled her heart. When she focused her eyes to the front again, she saw the demon slayer edge flying in front of her. In that moment an indescribable indescribable feeling of bliss filled her heart like an enormous wave. In that instant the love that she had for Han Sha-oh was as deep as the boundless ocean. "You won't be that lucky next time." A clear shout traveled from exceedingly far away. A thin figure danced on top of some rooftops like a swan elegantly dancing on a lake. Trunks and the others were enraged as they all leapt up to land on the roofs, planning on taking down this extremely dangerous female archer. "Don't chase her!" Han Sha-oh's low shout traveled from within the house at this time. The room door was open as a sinister-looking Han Sha-oh stepped out. Blood-red light emanated from his body as a thick killing aura condensed around him. His eyes were blood-red and his expression sinister and filled with the utmost cruelty. It was as if he was a demon from hell, having endured millennia to break through his shackles and arrive in the world of humans. Emily and the others were absolutely shocked by Han Sha-oh's current appearance and aura. They subconsciously halted their footsteps and looked at the somewhat unfamiliar Han Sha-oh. The current Han Sha-oh's presence and expression were all much too malevolent. He was simply too different from usual. Chapter 213, a bloodthirsty urge. Han Sha-oh took a deep breath in and slowly repressed his aroused desire for blood. A slowly stirring urge to engage in slaughter was slowly calmed after a few deep breaths. Under the gaze of Trunks and the others, Han Sha-oh's original distant and bloodthirsty appearance started to slowly revert to normal after he took in a few deep breaths. The blood-red light and that cruel aura all slowly disappeared until he returned to the form they were familiar with. "What happened to you?" Emily finally breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Han Sha-oh return to normal. Her beautiful eyes looked anxiously at Han Sha-oh. "My techniques were elevated to a new stage just now, and this new stage is incredibly difficult to control. I'm not that familiar with this new stage yet and lost my composure." Han Sha-oh revealed a faint smile when his mindset returned to normal and explained to the others, "I was so frightened. Your expression and aura earlier were real evil and scary. Even I felt terrified." Trunks looked deeply at Han Sha-oh. His heart was pounding even now. Of those present, only the little skeleton wasn't reacting out of the ordinary. He started capering happily when he saw Han Sha-oh appear and pointed at the corpses on the ground every now and then, seeming to be relaying his battle score to Han Sha-oh. Chuckling lightly in gratification, Han Sha-oh could feel the little skeleton's desire to show off, excitedly awaiting for Han Sha-oh's compliments. "Hey you brat, come here." "Well done." Beckoning his hand, Han Sha-oh stroked the little skeleton's gleaming skull when the latter walked over docilely with his bone dagger. The little skeleton's purple eye rolled around as his jawbone clattered together, appearing quite at ease. "Honored master, you're truly prejudiced. You've never treated me this kindly." Gilbert complained when he saw Han Sha-oh drown the little skeleton with love. The little skeleton had been by Han Sha-oh's side when the latter was still an errand slave. He'd started off throwing trash away for Han Sha-oh and took care of a lot of random irritating matters. When the little skeleton had grown stronger, it had protected Han Sha-oh a few times. These were deeds which Gilbert couldn't measure up to. Flicking a glance at Gilbert, Han Sha-oh was about to say something when he suddenly frowned and turned his eyes to the entrance. Lord of the Cairo mercenary Ben walked in through the doorway like a metal tower. Harris and a group of experts followed close behind him. Lorden's body was built very robustly, and he was likely even a bit heavier than a battle steed. His footsteps echoed dully on the ground as he walked. "What's going on? Where are the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries?" A voice that rang like a bell sounded from Lorden's mouth. Pointing at the corpses littered over the ground, Han Sha-oh smiled faintly. "Aren't these them?" Lorden's brow drew together as he looked at the ground, listing out names as though he were counting up his family's treasures. "Angaro Tulij Jelena." Shock blossomed on his face as he spoke. When he finally lifted his head to look at Han Sha-oh, shock was all that was left on his face. "You guys killed all of them?" "Possibly. Or maybe it was the curse of the evil god that helped us." Han Sha-oh smiled mysteriously and shrugged his shoulders as he answered carelessly, "These people are indeed of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band, and some of them are their core members. To think you've managed to kill so many of them. This is a big help to us." Harris was hard-pressed to conceal his joy after he walked in, and his voice seemed more emotional than usual. "What's going on here?" Lorden was thoroughly confused by Han Sha-oh's response and could not help but ask. "Lorden, you came too late. You only arrived after the fighting had finished. Looks like the efficiency of the Cairo mercenary band isn't as good as we thought." Trunks flicked a glance glance at Han Shao and spoke before the latter could speak. Trunks, you also know that there are many areas in the valley that need to be protected. Our mercenary band can't possibly station that many of our men here, Lorden said, and then snorted coldly with an irritated expression. To ignore our existence like this, Florida has become way too cocky. The ones who launched a sneak attack on you didn't even conceal their features. This is an obvious dismissal of us. Chief Lorden, I hope you guys can be more timely next time. The matters here have already ended and there's probably nothing here that's worthy of your attention left, Han Shao said, and then suddenly remembered something. Amongst those who attacked us this time was a great sword master called Gabriel. This person works for Bob Asher, chief of the Griffin Legion in nearby Valley City. I don't know if the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band is in leagues with Bob Asher. I hope you'll keep an eye out for this. Great sword master Gabriel, Lorden exclaimed in shock as he obviously didn't know of this matter. His expression grew grave. Nodding, Han Shao said, that's right. This person is the master of Bob Asher's eldest son Clark and has always been by Bob Asher's side. I hadn't thought that he'd leave Asher's side this time and be with the Rainbow Sickles. Don't worry, I'll investigate things thoroughly. Alright, we'll be leaving now if there's nothing else. Lorden seemed to be contemplating something with a darkened face as he spoke rather anxiously. Wait, I've been away from the valley for too long and don't know enough about Florida's strength. You should give us detailed information about all the experts of the Rainbow Sickle mercenaries and their strength. A Thunder Mage appeared today, as well as a female archer with amazing shooting skills. One of our companions was almost injured this time. We need detailed information on the Rainbow Sickles, Trunks hurriedly said when he saw Lorden about to leave. Female archer, Lorden cried out once again and said gravely that would be the female elf Maxine. She's a sharpshooter versed in the water, thunder and wind magics. She can combine all three magics into her shooting and send out incredibly frightening shots. This woman is very difficult to deal with. It's said that she's the fiancée that Florida's grandfather located for him. She's very mysterious and doesn't seem to have good relations with Florida. She's rarely in the valley these days but will always help whenever the Rainbow Sickles meet with danger. It looks like she's come back. Who was the Thunder Archmage? It was Emily's turn to ask this time. His name is Asa. He only joined half a year ago and I'm not too sure of his background. Vicious and cruel. He gets along well with Florida. He's taken care of most of the band's underhanded dealings this past year and is deeply trusted by Florida. Lorden was quite familiar with the experts of the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band and began to explain in great detail without hesitation when Trunks and Emily asked him. Apart from these two, have any other experts joined the Rainbow Sickles these past few years? Trunks continued to ask. Lorden's brow creased as he thought silently for a moment, then turned his head to look at Harris. Give him a copy of our intelligence. Harris started and then nodded, taking out a scroll from his space ring and handing it over to Trunks. The information regarding the Rainbow Sickles in here is likely going to be more detailed than what Miss Emily has. It looked like Harris and the others already knew of Emily's identity. They were the ones who held true power within the valley, and the identities of those they watched over would naturally not escape their eyes. Trunks nodded after scanning this scroll, then smiled at Lorden. Very detailed. We'll take care of Florida for you before the struggle for power begins. If this is the case, I will thank you all greatly. Not only will this shop be unconditionally yours, Miss Phoebe's guild shall be exempt from all taxes in the valley in the future. Lorden laughed heartily and strode outside with great steps. Harris, who followed closely behind Lorden, looked at Trunks and reminded the terrain of the Rainbow Sickle quarters is drawn behind the scroll. There are detailed descriptions of their open and hidden outposts. Destroy this scroll after reading it. Don't let it fall into the hands of others and give rise to unnecessary trouble. Trunks nodded understandingly and laughed coldly. Don't worry, I know what to do. Harris and Trunks were old acquaintances and naturally knew that Trunks and Florida had a death feud. Harris left with the parting words, good luck. When Lorden and the others had left, Han Shao said lowly, Lorden is trying to take advantage of us. But we want to find our footing in the valley as well, so we won't move according to his plans. The Kyra mercenary band and Rainbow Sickles aren't the only powers within the valley. There are some others that aren't weak either, and I'm sure they would love to replace the Kyra mercenary band and hold power in their hands as well. Trunks blinked and asked Han Shao, what would you like to do? Chuckling sinisterly, Han Shao looked at the sky and murmured to himself, the winds are strong and the night dark today. The Valley of Sunshine has been chaotic for a while now. Let's make use of this opportunity to make things even more messy. Chapter 214. The four great powers. Apart from the strongest Kyra mercenary band in the Valley of Sunshine, there were two other slightly weaker factions of the House of Minlo and the Guitar Orc tribe. The House of Minlo had originally been a minor noble family in a small kingdom. They had their own private army and had attempted a coup but had failed when their plans were revealed. They fought with the royal army of the small kingdom and fled, discarding their armor along the way. They'd finally arrived in the Valley of Sunshine with vastly decreased strength. They only possessed 300 soldiers then, but the House of Minlo had made off with quite a sum of riches from the small kingdom during the chaos of civil war. They used this fortune when they arrived in the valley to attract 1,000 experts of various professions, and their strength was now second only to the Rainbow Sickles. The House of Minlo was now the richest power within the valley, and the head of the house, Sawyer Minlo, always dreamed about becoming the most powerful within the valley, recruiting more soldiers and going back to their home, obtaining the authority over that kingdom. The Guitar Orc tribe was a small tribe that had originally lived in frosty desolation. They'd overcome countless hardships to immigrate to the Valley of Sunshine and take up residence within one of its mountain ranges. There were only 500-600 orcs within this tribe, but all of them were highly capable warriors that were tough to take on. The orcs of the Guitar tribe mainly functioned to protect the merchants and put their earnings towards taking care of their family and elderly. This faction wasn't weak, but the chief of the tribe was also constantly thinking about controlling the valley in order to gain more benefits and gold. The Kyra mercenary band, the Rainbow Sickle mercenary band, the House of Minlo, and the Guitar Orc tribe were the four strongest forces in the Valley of Sunshine at the moment. This information wasn't hard to obtain. Han Shao had just arrived in the valley not too long ago. Before learning all of this from Emily, everyone was aware that the four powers had uneasy relations and that each of them wanted to take over the Valley of Sunshine to leverage its resources and quickly increase their own strength. The Kyra mercenary band had only had 1,000 people to begin with. After they'd taken control of the Valley of Sunshine, their numbers had doubled in just a few years. This was all because they'd obtained enormous amounts of gold after controlling the Valley of Sunshine and attracted even more numbers of experts to join. To the Kyra mercenary band, it was a wonderful trade if they could immensely decrease the Rainbow Sickles without harming their own strength. A mere storefront compared to the entire valley, it was a worthwhile trade no matter how one looked at it. It was because Han Shao understood the situation within the valley that he was full of ambition and began to think for himself, trying to plot a profitable path for the mercenary band he'd just formed. Trunks, take your old comrades and go for a walk around the House of Minlo tonight. Conceal your faces and cause some trouble. Kill some people and set some fires. Han Shao looked at Trunks and smiled slightly. You mean make the House of Minlo think that another faction did it? Trunks' expression changed as he asked. They won't suspect us anyways when they're attacked, because we don't have the strength and have no reason to be enemies with them. They'll suspect the other three factions in the end, Han Shao explained. Trunks nodded and a sinister smile appeared on his face. I think I can do this well. I was used to the covert and open struggles between the factions when I was still in the Rainbow Sickles. Then good, be careful and don't expose yourselves. Cause as much destruction as you can. Trunks made use of the night and said nothing else, leaving hurriedly. It looked like he was planning on making some moves tonight. After Trunks had left, Han Shao said darkly to Emily and the two others, since the Rainbow Sickles have already made a move against Hells, we can't take that long down, can we? Come, let's go take a walk ourselves and see if we can kill some people at the Rainbow Sickles. Han Shao's group now enjoyed exceedingly good relations with the Kyra mercenary band. It was very convenient for them to enter and leave the valley. However, they didn't exit from the main entrance this time, but made use of Gilbert's flight ability to fly out of a quiet corner in the valley. There were rules in the valley as well. Under ordinary conditions, even archmages who could fly couldn't levitate themselves in and out of the valley. If they were discovered by the Kyra mercenary band, they would be immediately detained for questioning. The moonlight shimmered like water as it cascaded down over the white ground. The accumulated snow had yet to melt, and the snow-covered mountains and towering trees were inordinately radiantly beautiful beneath the rays of the moon. The rainbow sickles were located within a small mountain valley to the north of the Valley of Sunshine. When Han Shao's group arrived, they could see a row of low houses made of red tiles. When they peered into the mountain valley, there was a sizable hot spring cluster within the valley, and hot mist was arising from the waters, shrouding the mountain valley in white mist. There were many fresh flowers and grass planted around the hot springs, and because of the heat from the springs, the flowers and grass in the surroundings weren't afraid of the bite of winter. Many vibrant flowers were blooming all over the area. Stout-looking mercenaries were stationed at outposts all over the mountain valley. They were looking around alertly, always on their guard against the intrusion of enemies. Han Shao had Gilbert stop on a cliff over the valley and look downwards. Han Shao smiled coldly. Someone else may be making a move before us this time. Phoebe and Emily revealed confused expressions after his words. They looked in bafflement at Han Shao, with Phoebe asking, "What makes you say that?" "When we were at the storefront earlier," Dark Grand Magus Edwin and the female alchemist Belinda of the Calamity Church were observing not too far in the distance. "I sensed their position before I stopped, and the two of them followed after Andy when he left." Edwin and Belinda were the first to break off from the pursuit, and then it was Gabriel and the female archer Maxine who left. Edwin and Belinda should in the mountain valley below now. "If they're here to kill Florida, that will be a huge help for us," Han Shao said slowly as he looked down into the mountain valley below. "Then what should we do?" Starting at some unknown time, Emily had already grown accustomed to Han Shao deciding everything when he was present. Lifting his head to look at the sky, Han Shao said, "Only half of this long night has passed. We still have plenty of time. Let's wait for a while." Time passed quickly as roughly half an hour later violent magic pulses suddenly emanated from one of the most magnificent red tile buildings. A metal golem in the shape of the three-eyed demon god abruptly appeared out of thin air beneath the cool moonlight. The golem began body slamming the magnificent building as soon as it appeared. Its thick metal tail swept across the scene and sent red tiles flying everywhere, shaking all the buildings as well. At the same time, strong magic pulses accompanied the rumbling sounds of the earth shaking and mountains moving. Three hands of death appeared out of thin air and floated into the magnificent building through the windows, destroying its insides with abandon. "Edwin and the others have made their move. We can't sit idly by." Han Shao chuckled coldly as the air of bloodlust gathered around him again. The evil and ruthless expression from earlier once again floated onto his cheeks. "What should we do, honored master?" Gilbert was once again excited as he rumbled in his deep dragon voice. "Bear them on your back and fly over the mountain valley. Destroy all the buildings in this valley to the best of your abilities and spray out poisonous flame. If you run into any attacks that may injure you, fly away immediately and don't wait for me. No one will be able to stop me if I want to leave." Han Shao laughed loudly with a grimace and a coldly stern expression. He rushed down like a diving hawk, a blood-red light emerging from his body as his eyes were turned a deep blood red. "Will he be all right?" Phoebe had already discovered Han Shao's peculiarities before he'd flown down and couldn't help but voice her concerns to Emily. "Do as he says," Emily responded and kicked Gilbert in the sides. Dark Dragon, move out. A thin figure followed behind Han Shao in this moment, floating downwards through the air. The little skeleton capered wildly as he flew like a kite with a broken string. When he reached halfway, the 7-bone spurs on his back shook consecutively and his body regained balance. He followed closely behind Han Shao with a strange trail and dived down towards the mountain valley. Chapter 215. A frenzied slaughter. Cultivators easily became violent and angry in the bloodlust realm. One could only comprehend the wonders of this realm in the midst of bloodthirsty battle, and only through such slaughter could a cultivator understand himself better. Continued slaughter was the fastest shortcut to breaking through this realm. However, it was exceedingly easy for one to veer into a cultivation deviation during the slaughter. It was incredibly hard for a cultivator to regain their reason once they accidentally lost it, and they would become a crazed monster that only knew how to wreak mass slaughter. Therefore this realm was quite difficult to exercise self-control in. Slaughter was the fastest way to ascend from it, but it was also a one-way path. As Han Shao flew down from the cliff, his hatred towards Florida was infinitely magnified, including his anger towards the female archer Maxine who'd almost caused a fatal blow to Emily. His originally calm heart began to pound at a much faster rate than usual, and the magical yuan filled the demon infant with a thriving life force. When the demon infant had absorbed the pure power of the soul held within the purple demon eye, it'd help Han Shao break through his stalemate in the true demon realm. When he'd reached the bloodlust realm, although he would occasionally have the thought of rampaging around killing everything in sight, his strength had indeed taken leaps and bounds forward. An inky black shadow landed from the sky amidst large rumbling noises, and thick sense of killing intent arose, one that couldn't be ignored by anyone. When the panicking Rainbow Sickle mercenaries, in the throes of gathering their men and horses to respond to Edwin and Belinda's threat, discovered the abnormalities in the sky, they sent arrows, spears and javelins howling with lightning into the sky. However, none of the dozen or so attacks could approach the dark shadow. The descending figure swiftly recited a necromancy magic incantation, and a black light flashed through the skies. A troop of gargoyles appeared out of nowhere. They were wielding bone spears and lined up in a neat formation in front of the dark shadow, blocking all the arrows, spears and javelins. Suddenly an enormous black canopy expanded quickly from the dark figure. It covered the bright moonlight and enclosed a third of the valley in the canopy. A thick presence of death abruptly spread out. All those who moved around in its vicinity felt that their body was moving around much more stiffly than normal. The dark shadow landed in the valley beneath the cover of the canopy, and dark creatures started popping into existence shortly thereafter. The moonlight was blocked by the black clouds, making one unable to tell time and not knowing how much time there was until daybreak. The canopy of necromancy was a spell that had been lost long ago, and it adversely affected the battle strength of all enemies caught within it. All dark creatures would be strengthened in the range of this canopy, and their strength and speed would be increased after absorbing the thick presence of death around them. This was an evil magic that wore away at the opponent's strength and increased the strength of one's own dark creatures. It had been forgotten by humans on the continent since the cemetery of death had vanished. When Han Shao's magic materialized, the dark creatures all began excitedly attacking their surroundings. Not only did the rainbow sickles feel the limberness of their bodies affected, their eyes also felt abnormally dry, and their vision was likewise affected. Belinda, apart from Clarendon, has another necromancer come by this time? Edwin had been releasing dark magic when he saw the moonlight become obscured by the black clouds. He asked a gleeful question to Belinda, who happened to be manipulating her golems off on the side when he saw the dark creatures enthusiastically attack the mercenaries. Shaking her head, Belinda's expression was perplexed as she responded, "Clarendon's already been killed. There should be no other necromancers other than him." Edwin started when he heard those words and smiled faintly. "Then perhaps our superiors sent more people over. Even I have never seen such mysterious necromancy magic. I don't think that there's any other necromancers apart from our Calamity Church who would grasp such magic. Of course only our Calamity Church would have such mysterious magic. He must be one of our." Belinda had full faith in Edwin's words. It would seem that they had an unswervable confidence in the strength of the Calamity Church. "I'm Edwin. Which friend has come by?" When Edwin saw that the dark creatures were helping them after Han Shao had appeared, he couldn't help but call out in a friendly manner when he saw the dark creatures head off some of the mercenaries. His enormous amount of mental strength had been mostly depleted after releasing the canopy of necromancy and summoning 50 to 60 dark creatures of different levels. When the dark creatures began to attack with wild abandon under the cover of the canopy, Han Shao became a cruel shadow locked in the depths of bloodlust and began to vent his violence every which way. A craving for fresh blood cascaded down like the endless river waters, pushing Han Shao into a boundless frontier of slaughter. Wherever the dark shadow passed, the mercenaries with insufficient strength were all hacked to pieces by the sharp demon slayer edge, and fresh blood splurted everywhere. His eyes dyed blood red. Han Shao's hard to control desire to kill everything led him to kill all those in his path. He was as if a machine reaping lives, and all the mercenaries in his vicinity kept being subjected to frightful attacks. His body halted slightly after hearing Edwin's words, but he ignored them. When he looked around again, he discovered that apart from the little skeleton hot on his heels, there was no one else there. Now in the bloodlust realm, the durability of Han Shao's body had reached its peak. He could instinctively sense the danger around him as he fought, and could even clearly perceive the fear and trembling of those far away. Whenever he killed someone, the fear of his victim upon imminent death and his resentment after death would form a cloud of air hard to be seen by the human eye, to be absorbed by the aura of killing intent around Han Shao. As more and more mercenaries were slaughtered, the killing aura around Han Shao became more and more thick. A strong scent of blood even began to emanate from his pores. Han Shao's body and magical yuan kept being continuously refined in this process, and he could feel his strength increasing bit by bit in this process. In contrast, Han Shao's mind became more and more torpid the more his body and magical yuan improved. When the fear and resentment caused from killing others was attracted to his vicinity, this enormous amount of information seemed to affect Han Shao's mind, making the blood vessels on his brain pulse and giving him the feeling that he was entering a cultivation deviation. He realized that this was bad and scanned Chu Kanglan's memories, immediately realizing that in the bloodlust realm once the brain had this kind of torpid sign and wanted to kill and destroy everyone and everything in sight. This was a sign of one about to enter a cultivation deviation. His tried and tested willpower proved to be useful now. Han Shao recalled the demon slayer edge back into his storage ring and attempted to calm his rampaging heart whilst he still had some semblance of reason left. He ignored the chaos around him and sat down cross-legged. The little skeleton had been at Han Shao's side and helping him reap lives when he suddenly saw his master sit down. His purple eye flashed as the little skeleton waved a hand at some of the dark creatures nearby. The purple eye flashed on and off with an evil purple light like a broken light bulb. There seemed to be a mysterious power compelling the dark creatures. Several zombies and hate warriors walked over fearfully as the little skeleton beckoned to them, giving the little skeleton the respect that subordinates would give to their superiors. When they faced Han Shao, they could only move stiffly according to instinct due to being summoned by a spell. But when Han Shao had sat down cross-legged and was summoned by the little skeleton, they displayed fear and respect when they carefully surrounded Han Shao. They seemed deeply afraid that the little skeleton would be unsatisfied and become angry at them. They behaved like the most humble servants and slaves. This kind of performance seemed to indicate that they'd long since known the little skeleton or heard of the little skeleton's dominance and wondrous achievements. Otherwise, in the vast and boundless other dimension, how would an ordinary skeletal warrior incite so much fear and respect from them? Perhaps in the other dimension the little skeleton with the 7 bone spurs wielding a bone dagger and boasting of a purple eye had already grown into his own and become a famous and illustrious character.